There's a chance that the Templars brought back relics from Jerusalem. They were sitting there pretty for just under 100 years on the Temple Mount. That was where the Temple of Solomon was based. They did have a lot of relics, and frankly, your odds of finding something are as good as anybody else's odds. And who knows, there may be a hand of the Templars that guides you.
Hanging bandits on the road, telling stories hardly told, rarely proven. Seeking cryptid folklore myths, no better gang to come along with. Even if it's all a lie, we'll be in the car to find out why. Yetis, werewolves, ghosts and ghouls, get the cryptid hunting tools. River monsters, trolls, big cats, hoping we don't get attacked. To the seashore or woodland floor, if there's theories to explore, more ridiculous the better. Walking down remote country tracks, hoping that we make it back 100% human, bandits on the road.
Guys, I could do with a bit of good news, so please hit me with it.
You wouldn't believe it, Ben. The time has come. Guys, we finished the captain's last words.
That's exactly what I needed to hear, guys.
Because the album's finally done, we did CDs on the last one. We're thinking about doing finals. We've been doing all the cover shows and that. What's the funding situation?
What's the bank saying, man?
What's the bank saying? Well, I'll just be literal and basically, I've been organising the 1Ps and 2Ps, as you can see, into
Come
on.
Yeah, so I'm not pulling you guys' leg, and I was actually quantifying it all up, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you're not playing a cover gig, you've got to, weigh up the overhead. A lot of it was the overhead, and when it comes to the extra stuff, I hope you're all buying what I'm saying. It is 100% the truth. I'm sorry to disappoint you further, but it looks like for your dreams to ever materialise, it's going to have to be covers again, guys.
No. What, you're saying
that's a nightmare, Ben. Not a dream.
There's no more cover gigs for the Hanging Bandits, I'm afraid.
Look, guys, people have to do what they have to do in order to work hard and sacrifice. And basically, weddings, you've got the wig still. Listen, guys, a few rehearsals and of how deep is your love, and I'm telling you, you guys will be back in the frame of mind.
I know we spent a bit of time recording, but I didn't think it would cost all that. Do you know what I mean?
Ben, we told you this was a concept album. This is a serious artistic project, and then you're just saying go be the bloody Bee Gees.
All right, guys. Well, I'm sorry. The only other option, I'm going to have to think outside the box here. We've got quite a lot of contacts in the ancient history, Masonic world. Everything is pointing to the Knights Templar having treasure in Hertfordshire. Now, I've heard about this and I've not mentioned it because it's one of those things that, everyone's in the middle of album production, work, life, politics. I'm just thinking, do we really need to focus on the Knights Templar treasure? It could be another wild goose chase.
Well, but the thing is, Ben, if it's that or it's covers gigs,
there's no way.
I'm with him already.
Actually, seeing you guys with all the wigs on, having to listen to the Bee Gees and Lionel Richie all night. No. It looks like we're going to have to strike where the iron is hot and get wrapped up in this Templar mystery. Let's go for it, guys.
Cool. Get your ass down here and we'll see you soon.
Where's Santa again?
This is LBC.
So we're now off to the village of Preston, North Hertfordshire, which is the site of Temple Dinsley, and we'll see if there's any lost relics. But as is the case with all these sorts of places, private security could play a little role in the events.
Yeah.
However, if that happens, I'm going to do that kind of just be like, good evening, yes, we're here exploring. And there's two looks that get you into places, Indiana Jones and High Vis and Ladder in it. We are like a couple of seconds away from Temple Dinsley right now. It's behind that wall, in fact.
We are so funky, we look even pretentious.
Okay, we've made it to the ground next to the temple, but we have been told that we should not go too close to the temple because there's a big man with a big German Shepherd patrolling. What would Indiana Jones do?
Indiana Jones probably knock him out and take his outfit.
This is a quote from the Chronicles of Hertford Castle, which mentions the Knights Templar in the area of Hertford. It says, in January 1308, the whole of the Knights Templar in England were arrested by the King's orders. In February, a sorry group of 6 of the brethren arrived from their preceptory at Temple Dinsley, which is behind me, to Hertford Castle, and they were incarcerated there from the 14th of February to the 12th of June. During that time, it was Temple Dinsley that had to pay for their upkeep.
The Templars were really, really good at making money. And I thought, maybe this is overstated. But the more I looked into it, they had a system of bank checks for a start. The Templars had these commanderies, they call them, all over Europe. They were like farming estates, yeah, where they lived. You might join the local commandery, and basically your job was to look after pigs and cows, and maybe make butter and so on. But these things made money that was then channeled to the Holy Land. So there were a lot of people in the Templar Order who were just working on farms, basically, or doing small scale kind of medieval industry. They also got into money lending. Making interest on money was a sin, the church said, but somehow the Templars twisted that a little bit. I also found out the Templars used to go around as enforcers for money lenders. For example, the Italians who got into banking very early, they would basically say to to one of their creditors, I'm lending you this amount of money, but some armed gentlemen called the Knights Templar will be round to pick up the regular payments. But they got so good at bookkeeping and accountancy, they even on occasion ended up running the state finances for France and England at different times. So they kind of became like, I don't know, the Treasury or the Federal Reserve, I mean, in medieval terms.
Bit of picking today. It's a lovely day for it. So we're in the grounds of Temple Dinsley. We've just been looking, we've been trying to find the biggest, oldest oak trees from what Ben said about the treasure.
We're still trying.
And it's a very interesting place around here. There's a lot of wildlife.
Very monumental trees.
A lot of age in the trees. It's just it's a very tranquil spot as well. There's also some interesting lumps and stuff in the ground in this open field, which could indicate some old buildings.
There we go.
What?
Mate, is this the way into the fucking castle?
There is brickwork.
Yeah.
The only way to put a date on it is to get in there and find out.
There's a good chance there's rats down there. I don't think it's that old, but you can see there's literally wooden frame. This is a properly made archway, and there's a ruined cast iron fence of some kind that is, totally destroyed. Alex has found an actual chamber. We're underneath a tree. This is like some Game of Thrones stuff.
We're going in.
He did exactly what I would just... Wow, what? Are you going down in?
I think I can see the bottom though. This is all just sitting on that.
Yeah.
So if I go down about there.
Hey Ben.
If you want.
Yeah, I'll go down.
Yeah. Do you need us to go further back a bit?
How was it?
It's alright.
What do you guys think is the purpose of this?
It's a great question.
I honestly think it could be something as simple as like a food storage thing. But it's such a beautiful construction.
It's pretty well done, man.
Bricks are bent backwards and the dome roof.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I'll put weight on it if you grab my arm.
Any symbols?
I can do.
And then the floor can fall out and that'll be well Indiana Jones.
I really didn't think my outfit was going to get dirty.
No, but this is the real.
Braced?
I'm good, yeah.
I'm going to be locked on you. It's kind of all like covered in this weird film. So if the Holy Grail's in here, it's under hundreds of years of stagnant mud and rainwater.
The story in the Middle Ages that Joseph of Arimathea came to England he was actually Jesus's uncle or great uncle. He came to England with Jesus when he was a boy because of those missing years in Jesus' life after all. They lived in the village of Priddy in Somerset. They were basically doing lead and tin mining because Joseph of Arimathea was a tin and lead merchant, basically selling it from the Cornish tin mines and the Somerset lead mines to back to the Middle East. They go back to the Holy Land. Jesus grows up, does his ministry, is crucified, and a very sad Joseph of Arimathea returns with the blood of Jesus and comes back to Somerset, and then comes to this mysterious island, which we now call Glastonbury, the Isle of Avalon, and buries the chalice, and then it bubbles up red water. If you've ever been to the Chalice Well in Glastonbury, it's iron oxide, the cynics say.
Is that the first specimen we're going to take back to the museum to study?
It belongs in a museum!
And there wasn't any like Masonic symbol there or anything like
No,
that.
I was looking for that on the door frame and everything, but no symbolism. Just it'll be in how it's constructed to date it, but I don't know anything about that.
Man,
Well,
look, this is a mystery, man.
You can just see right here. You get the camera.
You can see that rock right there is not bricks.
Dry stone wall.
There, right there at the very beginning, that's not bricks.
If you think this site was renovated multiple times after the Templars, but significantly in the 20th century, it's possible that they just renovated something here as well. Bricks on the left and right almost look like they're just not to do a corridor, but just to give extra support. I reckon it would have been really rudimentary. Probably the hole would have been bigger as well to get in. And now it was quite a tight squeeze. This has been here since the 12th century, which is quite hard. I'm not saying this house, but the Templar site here, the 12th century. So like,
That's a hell of a long time.
it's a hell of a long time. So like, they must have restored this. They must have done.
but then why, when looking up all the research we've done at Temple Dinsley, does no one talk about this?
Yeah.
If this is a place to safeguard your treasures, you're not doing a good job at keeping it very safe and secure and secret.
So we just got told off by a farmer for straying from the footpath. We asked him about the tunnel we found earlier, but he was reluctant to give any information.
People that are that secretive or that grumpy, they have the secrets. Will you drift over rolling fields to me? Hold me in the highest bough. I'll be your treasure. But in history's rhyme, there's a place and a time and a call to the goal that these fools will not hold. I'm waiting for you. I'm waiting for the cows of Temple Dinsley. Some say they have the spirit of the Templars. This is St Mary's Church in Hitchin. We've just arrived. I think the turret at the back corner is supposedly the oldest part of the church. I think it's around 13th century. Apparently inside there's some old Templar relics that would have been taken from Temple Dinsley. Templars on 3, go. 1, 2, 3. Templars!
Alex has just paid for parking, but we've only got an hour here. Only an hour to find Templar gold.
Guys, think onto it. First coming across of ancient symbolism. This is like the entrance of the original old town of Hitchin now, where the church is and the old market is.
Here we go.
If you go into an English church today, all the walls are whitewashed. And it's all quite simple because that's the Protestant Reformation. Before that, sometimes they get discovered underneath the whitewash. These churches were covered in painting. Even the cathedrals, were covered in painting. And the paintings were often of hellfire, Judgment Day, and people, couldn't read. They couldn't read the Bible because it was in Latin and they weren't supposed to read it anyway. So what they did when they were in church is they looked around and they just saw devils, sticking tripods into people. And that's what was in people's heads. There's no TV. TV was the church, and that's the life you led.
You could probably like spend hours just studying all these images and looking for subtle symbolism within the hand gestures, with the way they're looking to the left, right, stuff that you could really go deep on. We used to send tin for the armies in the Middle East. So, and want that theory about Joseph, not the dad of
Joseph
Jesus.
of Arimathea.
Yeah, he was actually a tin merchant, is that correct? Or a miner?
That's one of the theories.
Everything comes back to King Arthur and the relics.
The most prized relics normally are to do with the passion of Jesus, the crucifixion of Jesus. So you got the crown of thorns. Everybody wanted the crown of thorns. You've got the Holy Grail, the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper. But also the story went that Joseph of Arimathea used it to catch some of his blood from the wound in his side at the crucifixion.
Whoa.
It's the holy sponge, believe it or not. You know, the sponge that was used to that you can still see that. Wine and vinegar, yeah. Well, they actually had the holy sponge, the pillar to which he was tied to, the whip that was used to whip him. Oh. At the time the Templars existed, the legends of King Arthur began to be, written down by people like Chrétien de Troyes, Wolfram von Eschenbach, Robert of Boron, and Wolfram von Eschenbach mentions a Grail castle, a castle where the Holy Grail was kept, which was guarded by, he calls them the Templars. And remember, this is contemporary of the Templars. So what people believe is that he's referring to the Templars, that he was writing there in his story saying the Templars were guarding the Holy Grail. I think King Arthur is all about the age of the Templars, because the people who wrote those stories, they were alive at the same time as the Templars, and their patrons were crusaders. They were crusading nobles who crusaded with the Templars. I think the King Arthur story is all about the Templars. It's not about some other era, hundreds of years before. It's about the Templar era. It's crusader propaganda.
As usual, when we're going to explore things, they're obviously covering something up, and they've decided to put some scaffolding in, I guess. Ben, how much law breaking are we allowed to do to try and get this gold before?
Well, it depends how much you want the vinyls, I think, basically.
Yeah, well, I think there's a good chance that we will be on the right track, but it's tough to say. I mean, there's a lot of evidence of Grail history in that church.
And then we've got Baldock as well, which is significant for so many reasons with it all. This is where it's really going to hit off.
But the story was that Baghdad was the richest city in the Middle East. It was the capital of the Abbasid Muslim Caliphate, and that the Templars called Baldock because they hoped it would one day be as rich as Baghdad. I don't know.
We're at another St Mary's church now, this one in Baldock, the market town that was set up by the Templars.
It's definitely in here, Reginald's grave. Most of them are 18th century. We're looking for 14th century or, 13th century grave.
This is a strong one as well. This, very elaborate. Sword, cross. But apparently there's something inside the church, right? We're going to go in now and see if we can find the old resting place of Knights Templar.
Oh, Ben. Right in front of you. That's it. That's it.
So the inscription is saying that Reginald de Argentine lies here who caused this chapel to be. He was a knight of St. Mary. Let every good man pray for his soul.
Literally no doubt for a historical record this would have been a busy place for the Knights Templar. Like they would have frequently travelled through and set up market stalls and maybe even lived here, as well as sort of Temple Dinsley areas.
Direct records of Reginald's involvement with the Knights Templar are scarce. The de Argentine family's prominence and the proximity to their estates to Templar holdings suggested a close relationship. On his actual memorial there's an inscription that refers to him as the Knight of St. Mary, which some interpret as his associating with the Knights Templar. So it's not exactly cut and dry that he's 100% a full-on Knights Templar. He was more like a nobleman, and he had a big family that was associated with the Templars.
The blueprint for the town we recognise as Baldock today began about the time of the Second Crusades in 1147.
This was an age of deep religious faith, and they, this was the pilgrimage, but with a lot of testosterone attached. This was an armed pilgrimage. And remember, these are people who may have been dead in their 30s and 40s. These were people who worried about, am I going to get to heaven? People genuinely believe that. I think sometimes we don't appreciate that people really did believe that one day, sooner than most of us are going to die, they were going to die, and were they going to wake up and find themselves in hellfire or in heaven, heavenly glory? And so the idea of kind of like going into battle, dying, and then waking up in heaven because you've done the right thing, weirdly, is very appealing.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Tony was saying that one of the Templars in particular was so against adornments and ornamentation, he didn't even like gargoyles being on churches.
Yeah, I can imagine, mate.
If you turned up with bling, they made you paint over it.
Wow.
Saint Bernard, who was their kind of spiritual advisor, he hated all those, like gargoyles in church, those kind of like hated all that, hated all the kind of like little things they drew into Bibles at those times, little creatures, and hated all that. No, everything had to be plain, simple. If a Templar turned up with like a bridle for the horse that had he had to paint it over. Any ornamentation had to paint it over, and they all had to look exactly the same. But that was part of the psychological effect on the enemy. The enemy's kind of used to this kind of like a load of colourful knights, not really charging in any order, going charging them with their. Now they've got this band of knights in square formation, white mantles, not saying anything, no cheering, nothing, just moving at them, and that's part of the terrifying kind of. That's a terrifying thing for the enemy. They just thought these guys they're not really human.
Afternoon, folks. We found ourselves on the way to mighty Hertford, where we're hoping to meet legendary but to some taboo tunnels.
There was been a threat from a sinister secret society based in Hertford, which warned people not to delve deeper into the town's subterranean secrets.
We're gonna talk to a Hertford local historian who's very much attuned to all of these histories and traditions.
And it was posted on a community website called War Online, and it was quickly removed.
Today we're joined by Hatfieldian classic Callum Ogby-Wright, who's going to join us on this magnanimous of an expedition. Callum, do you know what's the best way for fucking Hertford now?
And it read those responsible had no business publicising any of the Templar tunnels, disused or otherwise.
So we're on the right road again now.
So we're back on track, gladly.
This woman said there's definitely an entrance to a tunnel in my garden.
Tom, I was wondering, man. I was thinking the Crusades were, a mission that were mainly to go protect the edges of Christendom. On the edges, the eastern edge with the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, and the south of Europe with Spain. The story goes that Urban II, the Pope, he literally went on a Europe trip to literally call upon every knight. I think the Templars was one of the groups that formed out of this call.
I think what the church was trying to do, they were trying to channel a lot of the aggression of European knights into something a bit more noble, because they did spend a lot of time murdering and beating each other up, rather pointlessly. And I think the Pope just thought, wouldn't it be great if we used all this testosterone, all this energy, in medieval Europe and directed it that way?
He was throwing little perks into their,
a bit of land,
salvation. I think Urban II was. His perks were spiritual, mate.
The popes would often say, they'd often say to people, if you join the Crusades, if you join the Templars, you'll get this number of years wiped off your time in purgatory. They were called indulgences. And the popes would actually say this to encourage people to go into the Crusades. They say, you'll get 240 years off your time in purgatory if you join this crusade.
So we're in the Hertford Castle, which is, I don't have the utmost information on it,
Let me see if I can actually say anything more.
Good video.
Around us now is the curtain wall of the castle, and that is 1170, and that encircles the place which is Hertford Castle. Because our Hertford Castle isn't the kind of castle that Windsor Castle is, or Alnwick Castle, which is a fortress that looks like a child would draw. The castle actually is the green grass that people possibly can see at the moment behind us, because when people lived here in large numbers, they lived in timber buildings within that 1170 curtain wall. The first synod of the land was likely to have been held here where we're standing, and an Archbishop, Theodore, called bishops from across the country to a conference, a council.
And it happened in Hertford?
And it happened here. I mean, this place was really only a clearing in the forest then. And not a thing we want to boast about really, that the date, the way of calculating the date of Easter was decided at that synod. And so the fact that we've got this right mess of an arrangement when Easter's at a different date each year, according to the position of the moon, that is likely to have been in this very location that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So we have Hertford to blame.
Yes, I'm afraid.
Never knowing when Easter is.
We went to Temple Dinsley last night, which obviously
that's Hitchin.
Yeah, just outside Hitchin in a little town called Preston, and that's where the Templars who were allegedly taken here under arrest that's where they came from. So do you know anything about the Templar history here?
Well, yes, if you're going back to your Templar thing, which is obviously pretty central to all your thoughts, they were certainly around here in their heyday. Of course, the whole fundamental thing was the Templars began to get very rich as a community of people, and that was a threat to the kings of the day, and so hence some of their trouble. I would just say, to be miserable with you, the person that I've paid attention to years ago was the curator of Hertford Museum, and he said tunnels absolute rubbish. If they were anything at all, they would have been sewage. The Salisbury has always been, throughout its long life, the prestigious Hertford hotel. The Salisbury is at the middle of things, and if there's trouble, there is that possibility that a tunnel might be convenient. I hope you won't incite people to do too much investigation.
So we're on 4th Street now in Hertford. This is the epicentre of the Templar tunnels, according to Tim and Ben Atchison, who allegedly were secret modern Knights Templars who revealed all of this information about the area. We've been following above ground where these tunnels go, checking out the different buildings that they extend to, speaking to business owners to see if anyone will give us information about these tunnels. A lot of the basements here have been redeveloped, and so if there ever was evidence of a Templar tunnel network, that evidence is now gone. We have spoken to some people that said they've seen tunnels, and we have seen one tunnel entrance ourselves as well in the Salisbury Arms, so there is something around here. It seems like they've been bricked up for the most part. I do still think that a lot of this has its origin in the Hertford Mercury story, because it went from the Mercury to the tabloid press and then eventually international. It goes to show how far a convincing and intriguing and fun local rumour can go.
So this is the part of the Indiana Jones film that we never get to see, which is his downtime.
Reaching for his saddlebag, he takes
a tarnished cross into his hands. And standing like a bridge now he shouts across the ocean to shore. Then in the blaze of tangled hooves he gallops off across the dusty plain, vain to search again where no one will hear.
11th century, around the time of the Templars. Maybe there'll be some tunnels.
Passing in the graveyard, he is wild but he is cold, he is strong but he is
In John Barber's excellent book on the Hertford tunnels, he mentions that although there isn't a great deal of Templar lore in Hertford, there is a fair amount in some of the surrounding areas, including Bengio. I'll be honest with you, fam, we need to get these vinyls. We've been to about 5-6 different locations now.
Yep.
And we ain't got anything.
Nothing. We're getting stopped at every single avenue at the moment, which is not too fun. Yeah,
we ain't doing any more weddings, fam.
Well, never say never. The way it's going, you know, we could well be. Look into this Chelsea farm.
Okay.
So let's just have a look where.
Well, so the Templars knew some good fucking spots in Hertfordshire when it comes to the countryside.
Well, the hospitallers got all of their land and relics afterwards.
Oh yeah, they passed away.
I'm not sure where it went after.
Do they still exist?
No, I don't think so.
But yet the Templars and the Masons still exist.
Yeah, the Knights Templars and the Freemasons still exist, although the Knights Templar now are basically a charity, I think.
Traditionally, Freemasons, bought into a lot of these stories because they believe they're the descendants. Although they often say that a lot of Freemasons say, no, we don't. We're just being allegorical. But a lot of Masons in the past have written that they are the descendants of the Knights Templar. But in Portugal, the Templars weren't destroyed. They were rebranded by the king, and they were turned into a new order called the Order of Christ. The Order of Christ went on to lead the navigation that led to the discovery of the New World. It was the Order of Christ that discovered Brazil. So, in a weird way, the Templars did continue. In Portugal, in Spain, they became the Order of Montesa and continued that way. And there are theories as well that did some of the Templars become pirates? Did they become mercenaries? Because they couldn't have just melted away. And you've got armed men basically who've been, highly trained, who are also very pissed off.
We just run up another false lead in Bengio looking for Temple Chelsea, but that building is long gone at this point. So nothing, no treasure, no obvious historic sites, and at the moment no vinyls for the captain's last words. All looking very disappointing right now.
Another failure, which seems to be a kind of consistency of the trip.
Just pointless. As Alex says, just totally pointless. We're starting to mentally prepare ourselves now for a run of wedding gigs. In a fit of desperation, we're heading on to Preston, which is where we were on the first day. We're gonna go to the church there and see if there are any clues. There's this idea that the Templar may be a lot more poor than you might think, because they're sending a lot of the financing they get straight back to the Holy Land.
Yeah.
The thing that occurs to me with this though is because we know, like Tony was saying, they had this sort of system of credit checks that could be sent across Christendom. The thing is, if you're doing that, then you need a decent amount of money in every location, right?
They developed this bank check system where you could basically, instead of taking all your money on crusade, we are bound to get robbed. Instead, you deposited some in a Templar commandery in London, say. They wrote a little chitty saying, you have deposited this amount of money with us in London. And there was a secret code on it or something like that. And they then went off on crusade to Jerusalem, and they could draw down on it, while they're in Jerusalem. And that kind of idea of bank checks, that was revolutionary in the Middle Ages. Nobody ever heard of that before. And there's even an example I give in the book. The French king was actually on crusade, having a really rotten time. He had to hide behind a tree while he was shot up by loads of arrows in a battle that went badly wrong. He actually sent a message back to Paris saying to his treasurer in Paris, deposit this money quickly with the Templars so I can draw it out here. And the Templars went along with this and they arranged it. And of course it was great for them because they had the king by the doodahs, basically, you know, which of course proved to be their undoing in the end.
What we actually mentioned earlier is, who would you want doing this? You would want people who have taken vows of humility and poverty to be in charge and making sure everything's legit, wouldn't you?
The Templars really were happy to do arguably kind of shady financial dealings, or certainly to blur the lines.
Even arguably the Crusades, like, a lot of it seems out of character to Jesus himself, doesn't it, really?
The Pope talking to Jesus about the Crusades he's got planned, this new type of war.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jesus being like, yeah, that does seem like a fair option.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to find out how they justified their order, and their vows were very, very insane vows, weren't they? Yeah?
Very strict vows.
The Templars had a rule book. One of them that always makes me laugh is that they had to sleep basically with a light on in order not to do what all young men do when the bedroom doors closed. So basically, they weren't allowed to marry. They weren't even allowed to pleasure themselves. And basically, yeah, they were told, you know, they had to keep their hair short. They had to keep. They had no ornamentation, no bling. They weren't allowed to gossip. They weren't allowed to laugh. They weren't allowed to gamble. They weren't allowed to hunt. And there was a guy called the Draper who went round and basically enforced this. Any letters from home had to be, you know, vetted. It was a bit like being in prison in some ways, and a very hierarchical structure. You've got the Grand Master at the top, and then these provincial masters in different parts of Europe. So very structured, very disciplined, and also quite secretive. A lot of rumours start to spread. These guys are too good to be true. What's really going on?
It's meant to be open, yeah?
Yeah, till 8 p.m.
8 p.m.
You could have potentially guessed that would happen.
Carver's gigs, I guess, isn't it?
Hang on, guys. I do have a contact called Malcolm. He is supposed to be the one who looks after the church, or one of the people who has got a key. I think desperate times calls for desperate measures. We're going to have to ring him. It could be risky because he could be part of the secret society that's trying to halt our investigations, but at this point, what more do we have?
Thanks, Ben. It's nice to know you're on our side, because Covers gigs, you know, I get it's easy cash, man. I get it's easy cash, but it ain't fun.
I understand your pain, and yeah, we're going to do everything while we're here to try and turn the tides of the investigation. Yeah.
I'll come down if you like.
Oh, that would be absolutely amazing, Malcolm, if you could.
I'll be about 5 minutes.
Let's have a look at this.
Yeah.
This is quite a nice look. By the way, it's been constructed, and we don't know how or why, on a ley line. Now, the St Michael and St Mary ley line starts in Cornwall and heads east across the country. Goes through where they have the pop concerts at Glastonbury, and it goes straight through the middle of this church.
I also love the key.
Yeah, the
great key.
Oh, that's the small one. You should see the big one. The ley line comes through here. We have the door. Welcome to St Martin's. Built a bit like a barn, really. It's not what you expect to see from the outside, is it? So the stone is there. It weighs 940 pounds. So that's the stone. It's really a sword with a cross, and that's called a floriated cross. So it's decorated with oak leaves. And if you look at the back, you'll see there's a sword on the back. And that honour was accorded only to the preceptor. When we dug the site there, which we did, it's quite an extensive site, we found stuff ranging from Roman, Anglo-Saxon to some artefacts from here.
We have heard some stuff has been moved to London.
Yeah, it may well have been. You know what London's like, it wants everything, doesn't it? We found the original cobblestone road that led to the priory itself, and it's still there under the turf, complete. Sort of 14, 15 feet wide. So enough for a good cart and a bunch of horses.
Yeah. Do you know which master of the Templars this will have belonged to?
No, we don't have any records at all, and that's a pity.
And the basement at that time and I guess still now is the only thing that remains of...
Yeah, there's nothing above ground now. In the grounds themselves, just up above the old college, there is what is clearly a collection of carp ponds. The monks were partial to a carp or two. Early fish and chips, I guess.
So do you think there's still some mysteries to be found?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
absolutely,
big believer.
Absolutely. There is. It was too important a site to have disappeared so completely.
When the order was closed down, the Templars were moved from Dinsley to Hertford.
The Templars as an order were comprehensively wiped out, literally in a few months. They were murdered, they were burnt at the stake, they were whatever, they all disappeared. And with it their wealth. And that's the mystery, I suppose.
We know that the Templars were arrested en masse, and the trials went on for years. The trial documents still exist, and we know the Templars were tortured. One of them even turned up in court with his feet bones in his pocket because they'd covered his feet in fat and set them on fire. What the King of France and the Pope said is that we thought for 200 years the Templars were Christian warriors, but no, they weren't. The Templars were worshipping demons. The Templars were kissing each other on the base of the spine. And this is actually what it says in the arrest warrants. It even says in the arrest warrant they crucified Christ a second time. Now, some people have argued that the reason the Templars were crushed, and this is where we drift into mystery more than history here, the reason the Templars were crushed is because they actually found some of these relics. And that they were, as it were, they became too powerful.
So we've had a lot of people, turn their nose up at us and really shoo us, poo-poo us.
I think, personally, anybody who has the time and real interest to explore some of these things should be free to do so. Very often, so-called amateurs are not so amateur, really, and they do at the end of the day, they usually come up with something interesting, different, new, whatever. But that's nice, isn't it?
Trip. It is.
It's a nice old thing.
It's incredible. So there we have it. I guess we've actually found the buried treasure. It lies in this small new built church in Preston Village. Who'd have thunk it?
Who would have thought, man?
Unlike Indiana Jones, we're probably not going to go and actually tomb raid this time. But it's something about it's just even nicer that it's left here for the local community to enjoy, and yourself.
So we have to say, like the Templars say, we have to say non nobis domine, guys.
Non nobis
domine.
Ba-ba-da-ba.